Ryder, welcome to the UK, but welcome to Waterstones.
Thank you for having me.
I don't have a diary or a journal or anything like that. And before we get to whether this is going to sort of change my life, I want to talk a little bit about you because you were the man who invented bullet journaling effectively. And this is something that a lot of people do, and they found it has made a huge difference to their lives. But I was really intrigued when reading your book to know about the origins of it, so that for you, it was your ADD, your attention deficit disorder, that sort of helped shape this way of journey. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how your sort of own personal thing?
Yeah, it became evident very early on in my educational career that I had challenges that my other classmates didn't have. So after I was diagnosed, I had a kind of a conundrum in that, yes, you have a condition, but we don't really have a lot of solutions or tools that could help you out. So I was left to my own devices, and I started actually designing my own tools, my own tips and techniques, one little piece at a time, trying to figure out ways that I could focus better, become more organized and more productive, because these skills seem to elude me.
Well, I have in my hand here, this is a bullet journal. It's a really beautiful journal, actually. And this is a very analog way of doing things in a very digital age. And of course, there are just gazillions of apps out there that claim to be able to organize your life and make things easier for you. Why is this approach more effective as far as you're concerned than the sort of digital alternatives that are out there?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you need, right? I would never say that the analog is the solution, right? For me, it's not digital versus analog, it's digital and analog. They're all just tools, and I think tools need to be judged by how effective they are in helping you move towards where you're going, help you accomplish your goals. And for me, I found that using only digital tools was not, in fact, making me more productive. And I think a lot of that came down to the fact that I spent so much time being organizing everything just so that I actually wouldn't do anything. And the second part is that it lent itself to too many distractions. You know, on the one hand, I'm like planning a meeting, and then all of a sudden I'm buying shoes, and I don't really know how that transition happened. And I found that in the analog space, I can actually take a moment and think about what I'm working on, ask myself, why am I doing this? What is the value here? And these might seem like very obvious questions, but I don't think it's clear that we are asking ourselves those questions enough and on an ongoing basis. And the process of journaling, A, makes me go offline, and B, has helped me form a habit of actually checking in with myself to make sure that I understand why I'm working on what I'm working on, see if I'm actually doing this the best way possible, and just all these small, tiny adjustments that over time compound into making quite a difference.
There's one of the sort of myths that you explode quite earlier in the book, which is this idea of being busy. In the modern world, we all feel that we're very busy all the time. We've got a lot to contend with. But actually, you point out that it's not really that we're any busier than we used to be, but there's just a lot more competing for our attention. There are a lot of distractions. Is there anything that we can do about that through the day, or is it simply, as you say, by taking those moments with the journal for reflection and to take stock of things that really help you to kind of get rid of those distractions?
For me, that's proven to be a very powerful technique. Sure, there are other ways of doing this. Maybe go for a walk, or carve out the time that you need to detach. And what's interesting is if you know that time is coming, then you also start behaving differently, because generally speaking, at least for me, when I went online, I'd just be like, okay, I'll work until I'm not working anymore. But if all of a sudden I start time boxing my day more effectively, then I know it's like, okay, I only have 3 hours to get this done, because after that I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to sit down with my book. And I dedicated myself to allowing myself to have that time to make sure that I always did do X, Y, or Z. And I found that with journaling was nice, because I could actually think, right? As opposed to taking a walk, I might think of something, but then I forget it. So being with a notebook immediately allowed me to capture my thoughts and clarify my time, and thereby I became less and less busy. The interesting result was that I realized that I was working on so many things that didn't matter or add value to my life. And I think that we're all guilty of that, in the sense of like we hoard our tasks and our to-dos, because the busier we are, the more important we become, quote unquote, because like, look, I'm so busy I can't do anything. That must mean I'm meaningful or desirable or whatever it is. But in fact, what you're doing is you're just letting a lot of noise into your life. And I feel like true productivity is about working on less, but having more focus to invest in the things that are meaningful.
We're not going to talk about how bullet journaling really works, because there's a brilliant video that you've made that actually sort of shows really clearly how the journal can actually work. And what I've been intrigued by through reading the book is that it's so much more than just simply a way of making a better to-do list and being more productive with your time. That there are these elements of, as you say, stripping away the stuff that's unnecessary, but therefore leading a better life and actually being far more effective at doing what you want to do in the future. And that there's this almost sort of, I hesitate to use the word, but there's this sort of mindfulness aspect to it, where if you give yourself the time to really think about who you are, what you want to achieve, it becomes way more than just a journal, doesn't it?
Certainly. I mean, the idea is not that we're trying to run faster in the hamster wheel, right? I find that bullet journaling encourages people to actually think about what it is that they're doing. You know, not just about how to become more effective and how to get more crammed into your day, but actually understand what value these things add to your life. And you're doing it every day, so it's not every time you're sitting down with your notebook you're having like an existential meltdown, right? You're just asking yourself, why am I doing this? Is this vital? Does this matter? What would happen if I never did this? Ever? And all of a sudden you start realizing that a lot of these things don't pass that test, but you also are getting in touch with yourself by asking that. It's like, okay, why does this matter? You need an answer for that. And if you don't, then all of a sudden that's something you can explore. And in that process, you just become more familiar with the way that you think and the things that you respond to, the things that you don't. And you start creating more of a framework of self-learning on an ongoing basis. And through that process, you can make much more informed decisions. Now you know when an opportunity arises, is this an opportunity that I'm just going to go on autopilot and sure, I'll just say yes to everything, or am I going to say no to this because I know that it's going to take too much of my time and energy and really not provide the value that I need for my investment, that kind of thing. So you just become significantly more mindful about how you're investing your time and your energy, which are really the only two resources that ultimately matter.
One of the things that's sort of unique about this, I suppose, as a system of organising your life, is that there's this community that you allow to sort of help shape how it works, so that it's changed a lot since you first came up with your version of it, and it continues to adapt and evolve. Have you been surprised by anything that's come from the community that's taken it off in a completely different direction?
Constantly. Absolutely. I mean, the way I designed the bullet journal method was to be very flexible because I thought in different ways. So it would be my sketchbook, it would be my, tracker or to-do list or class notes, and I never found a system that could do all these things in one place, and I always found that really irritating that I needed a different notebook for all these things. So I designed the methodology to be able to essentially house whatever your thought looked like. And that was just for my own mind, and it never occurred to me that that flexibility would lend itself for other people and different use cases to so seamlessly adapt my methodology. Like, I'm never going to be a mother, I'm never going to be a doctor, I don't know what that experience is like, but because it's so flexible, they were able to map that onto their experience. And I'm constantly surprised by how that flexibility ends up being used for such specific things that I have absolutely zero awareness of. It's like, wow, that works perfectly for this thing I've never even heard about before. So that, for me, that's one of the more exciting parts of all this. The community constantly shows me the potential of the thing that I designed, and that was unexpected and kind of like a really happy accident.
Well, I have, as I said earlier, I've never really kept a diary or a journal, and I know that I need to get better at sort of organising my time. So I have a fresh bullet journal. I have your guide here to get me through it, and it appears to have already had effect. I appear to have picked a shirt today which seems to be covered in symbols from the bullet journal. But it was great to get a bit more insight from you about how it works and how it develops. So Ryder, thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me.